Well, hello, this is Kentucky State Senator Gerald Neal, and welcome to Straight Talk. As I've always said, I say it every time, when you get this, share this with someone else and get them to share it further because what we're trying to do is have a discussion across the community. In fact, it's not just in Louisville, it goes beyond, it goes nationally. So we want to make sure that we get in this discussion. We want it to be very lively, and you're a part of it. In fact, I want to encourage you to do the same thing I'm doing. In other words, you start a straight talk, a Facebook Live or some other form of communication, and let's keep this discussion going. I think the key to any challenges that we have in society are directly related to what we don't do. And I'm talking about talking to each other and listening as best we can. So that's what Straight Talk is about. And I welcome you again to this. Now, I have some very special guests here today. I very special. And if I didn't emphasize this, they both get me some kind of way. But actually, they're good friends as well. I have State Representative Jerry Miller, who serves in the Kentucky House of Representatives, who you're going to meet in just a second. And we have the illustrious Louisville Metro Councilwoman Paula McCraney. And these are people that are very, very involved in government, as you would suspect, but I'm talking about really involved. They are deep into the issues that we're facing today. So I want to welcome my guests, Jerry, Paula.
Thanks for having us, Gerald.
Okay, so look, we're going to call each other by first name. Jerry's already done the right thing. I get doctors, lawyers, and candlestick makers, and I have to break them down. They get so formal, so I'm glad of that. So we're all friends, so we can talk about it. So let's get right into it. Well, let me do this first. This is Black History Month. I call it, the Black History celebration that we do in Kentucky Capitol. We call it a Black History celebration because we recognize that Black history is a 365-day-a-year piece. But I did want to pull out something here. Say Black History, this is just a little background, honor and reflect. This little piece I'm reading says Black History Month is the annual month-long celebration in February that marks the achievements of the African American community and recognizes their central role in U.S. history. Okay, well said, well done. In 1926, the historian and scholar Carter G. Woodson chose February the 7th for the first celebration of Negro History Week. This was because the birthdays of both Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass, two Americans who shaped African American history in the U.S., fell in February on the 12th and the 14th, respectively. So President Gerald Ford officially recognized February as Black History Month in 1976, along with the US, Brazil, Canada, Colombia, Ireland, the Netherlands, and the UK, have annual celebrations that commemorate Black history. So, I guess a little late, but it's here. And we have to take advantage of that. And we're taking advantage of it in the legislature as well. You would think our face-to-face gathering with COVID and all is going to be a challenge for us this year, but nope. Via the virtual mode of communication, the platform that's provided, the technology that's out there, we have in our 2021 Black History Celebration virtually, beginning Tuesday, February the 16th at 11:30 a.m. And its central theme is the struggle continues, pandemics, social justice, equity, COVID-19. So be sure to tap into that. This is our first outing on this format, and we certainly would like to have you there. Then secondly, and then we're going to get to our guests, on Monday at 6:30, we're having the African American Initiative, which we refer to as AAI, is having a COVID-19 summit. That's at 6:30. Guess what? It's going to be simulcast on WLOU radio. And of course, it's a Facebook Live event. And we're going to try to bring it up on YouTube at the same time. But if we can't, it'll be immediately on YouTube thereafter. So we invite you. We have some great experts that's going to bring you up to date on everything you need to know, at least at this particular point. And we're going to talk about issues and one disturbing issue, this issue about some people being reluctant, particularly in the Black community. I can't say just particularly because I find it in the white community as well. but of this in a disparate way in terms of taking vaccine. We want to talk about that and see what you think about it as well. And maybe these facts will help you with that. So having said all that, now we're going to get to the reason we're here today, and that's our guest. So here's what I want to do. We're all friends. We're going to, normally I do this interview piece, fine. What we're going to do this time, we're going to have a discussion. We're just going to talk about it. We're just going to jump in. We're just going to share wherever we want to share. And we're going to focus at first on the crucial issue that's before the legislature now, that's already been passed in a particular form by Metro Council, and that is the Civilian Review Board that, by the way, was set up for accountability purposes and trust purposes and all that sort of thing. So I'm going to start with Paula on this. Paula, could you give us a little background on how we got to this?
Well, I can tell you that I understand a lot of years, several people have been trying to get a true and living civilian review board with actual subpoena power or some type of say in the process of holding police accountable. And while this has been going on for years, one was set up in Louisville, the Civilian Accountability Board, and it was really a board that was there to rubber stamp whatever the police investigation was, because I served on that board and all we did was listen to the public integrity unit as they shared with us old cold cases that were finally solved and they had already been adjudicated. And after the report, all we could say was okay, because it was a done deal. They had no input in the investigation. They had no input into any recent killings or any misconduct by police officers. So it was not a real working board. So once I got elected, I was advised to resign from the accountability board because of a perceived conflict of interest. And so I did. But that was one of the things that I thought I would make as my priority for some type of legislation. And so I picked up the legislation, started reading it, wanting to put more meat on the bone. And I recognized just how heavy of a lift that was for me as a neophyte Metro Council person. And I just said, you know, this is a lot. And I don't think our community is really ready for the type of civilian review board that we need, because it's going to take some heavy lifting to get the FOP on our side, to get police to understand that this would be pro-community, pro-police, pro-accountability, nothing anti-police about it. And so I started working on it.
Let me cut in just for a second. Now, I know that the mayor put together a work group. I served on it. Nina Kirkoni served on it as well. Was the piece that we sent over, was that just an input piece and you all devised what you thought would happen? Or did you take some of the basic tenets from that just for some informational purposes?
We took what was existing and rewrote it.
So it really wasn't a product of the civilian review work group, but part of the effort, I guess you would say, in support of, they endorsed the concept of civilian review board, an independent civilian review board.
Yeah, I mean, because we had some semblance of a review board in existence. And right. So with this new legislation, we codified it and we put more meat on it. Gotcha. And so what was presented to the work group was the beginnings of what I had worked on as far as updating the existing model.
Okay, thank you for that input. That clarifies that. So back to what you were talking about. So now you got your model, you're developing that. Go ahead from there.
Well, after I was working on it and realized that it was going to take a lot of training for the Civilian Review Board members, it was going to take a lot of convincing the community that we want a particular type of Civilian Review Board, one that had true oversight and one that was not regulated by or manipulated by the mayor or any other political figure. So, it really had to be crafted so that people can understand it is for the police and their protection, and it was for the community and their protection. And so once that was established and the need was really truly there, Breonna Taylor's case happened. And that was the timing that was the impetus of the mayor putting together that work group. Because
So
when I
this-
first started on it, it was 2019.
Gotcha.
And so it was nothing happening. And I thought nobody would be listening. And so that's why I think timing is so important, because fast forward to 2020, and when that happened, the whole world was awake.
Yeah.
And so it was time now, everybody was calling for reform.
Gotcha. So let's go a little deeper, because when we're going to toss this discussion back over to Jerry, because where we operate, we are dealing with this issue in response to what's happening in Louisville primarily with respect to that. So just some of the aspects, the key part of that piece, I think, relates to an independent board, and there's a request for subpoena power for the board itself. And what was behind that, and why is that important in you all's thinking?
Well, with this new piece of legislation, we added to it the Office of Inspector General. With that piece, it really gives the Civilian Review Board credibility, because you're going to have a trained, skilled Inspector General to do the investigations. The Civilian Review Board members would not be involved in that. So if you have somebody who is skilled and trained and they understand the inner workings of the justice system, they understand policing, that adds credibility to the board. So you have that piece, but in order for that person to effectively do their job, they're going to have to be able to compel testimony. And so they would need subpoena power. And that's where we are right now with it.
So let's divide this piece. When you say investigation, you're not talking about the police investigation. The police have their own processes internally to do investigations, correct?
Absolutely. We're not saying that the Inspector General has anything to do with the inner workings of the police department. That person is there just to investigate any complaints about misconduct of a police officer or any police officer involved shooting. That's what they would be, not the internal workings of the police and what they do. It's just those things that the community might have a complaint about, and law enforcement themselves, because I have been told numerous of times that the officers want a way to clearly lodge a complaint against their fellow officers. And right now they don't have that outlet. They do through their internal investigations, but they feel so boxed in and they feel like it's not really an open process because they are ridiculed for complaining. So if they could have a process like a Civilian Review Board and an Inspector General to lodge a complaint against their own fellow officers, they feel safer.
Well, from where we're operating, this question of subpoena power comes into play. And the beauty of this discussion is we got Gerald Miller, who knows the workings of Metro Council, having been Metro Council member and now a state representative, and very much involved in this issue regarding the subpoena power piece. Jerry, just start wherever you are when you picked it up, your insights, if you will.
Yeah, and when Metro Council passed the ordinance, I think it was in November, December, Paula.
Yes.
I had been working on a bill related to 67C is the section of the state law that relates to Metro Louisville. And I realized that there were some elements of that ordinance that we're going to have to roll into state law to make it work. And so I added the first section of the bill, what we've referred to as creates the statutory framework for the Citizens Review and Accountability Board. So it recognizes in the CRAB and law it essentially codifies the Metro Council ordinance for hiring a professional inspector general to perform the investigations, provides the board with the ability to go to closed session, which is really important because, as Paula said, one police officer is not going to rat on another police officer unless he or she knows it's confidential. So need an airtight confidentiality. Same with open records, because much of what we do in government is subject to an open records inquiry. But it's not really appropriate if you've got an active investigation. So it gives that same confidentiality to the CRAB.
And I understand that the local, correct me if I'm wrong, Paula, I understand the local legislation recognizes and points out that all of the protections with open records and all that is still in place. It doesn't disturb all those confidentiality requirements, correct?
Absolutely.
And that's what Jerry's talking about
Right.
here, so they're in place, but from the state standpoint, Jerry's saying, yes,
Yeah.
we're doing that. Okay, go ahead.
And for the folks listening or watching that haven't been to Frankfurt, it's we have a saying that we don't pass perfect legislation in Frankfurt. We pass legislation that can pass the House and the Senate, and that's a long process, as Senator Neal knows. And so you have to go and figure out, okay, who's against this bill? We know who's for it. Who's against? Who should be for it? Who's against the bill? So we have to figure out, okay, how can we get around their objectives, work with them, bring them in the room and say, okay, here's what we're trying to do. What are your concerns? And it was that privacy and open records that was the big concern of some people. And so we tried to, in talking through that, realize that in 2017, I introduced a bill to give the Ethics Commission subpoena power.
Right.
And the reason for that is all like the Legislative Ethics Commission in Frankfurt and the Executive Branch Ethics Commission in Frankfurt have subpoena power, so they can investigate. So we gave that subpoena power. I was trying to give it directly to the Ethics Commission. It actually, by the time it got through the Senate, it was, no, we're not going to give it to them directly. We're going to give it to Metro Council's Government Accountability and Oversight Committee, which I can't recall who the chair is now.
Brent Atkins.
Yeah, Brent Atkinson's the chair. Okay. So today, if the Ethics Commission were doing an investigation, they would go to Metro Council to get that. So similarly, we have a framework in my bill that the CRAB and it would really be up to Metro, I presume, to determine how that happens, but probably the chairman and the inspector general, maybe just the inspector general, would, after doing his or her work initially, would then come to the Government Accountability and Oversight Committee, and they would vote to go into closed session. And then the inspector general would present the information and said, well, we've tried to get this information, but we're being stonewalled. We need a subpoena. So they would, once they got a majority of the Metro Council Government Accountability and Oversight members to vote yes, then a subpoena could be issued. Metro Council issues it, and if the person doesn't appear, they can go to court and get the enforcement of the subpoena to make sure they actually came and testified.
Let me ask this real quick, and correct me where I'm wrong.
Sure.
So the Civilian Review Board, in the course of its work, says we need a subpoena. We need more information, and we need. So they go to the government. They go through an existing committee of Metro Council.
Right, that has had that power since 2017, and I think they've only used it once, which was last year.
Okay,
Right.
that already has subpoena power.
Right.
So they have the ability to subpoena. So they go to Metro Council, to that particular committee. That committee makes the determination as to whether or not a subpoena should be issued or not, I assume. Is that correct?
Right. If the inspector general presents his or her case in closed session and the majority just votes to do that, just like the inspector general has to go to the CRAB and a majority of that board has to vote, yes, we agree with you. You go to the Government Accountability and Oversight Committee to get the subpoena.
So what this is, and correct me, what this is that they hear the information from the Civilian Review Board and make a determination, yes, we think this warrants a subpoena. Then basically what they're doing is making a recommendation to the board, and the board votes on it. The full board votes on issuing the subpoena or not. So the full board is not obligated to issue that subpoena. Is that correct? Regardless of what they say.
Well, wait a minute. When you say board, are you talking about government? We have to clear it up. Are you talking about the CRAB board, or are you referring to the Government Accountability Board?
Let me clarify the question, because I want to make sure we get this straight. My understanding is that they go to the Government Accountability Board to be heard.
Right. Once the CRAB board votes to send the inspector general to the GAO and request it.
Okay.
Well, let's clear that up. Let's clear that up right quick.
Well, let me get to the next step, because this is where I was going, because I've said the word board. What I mean by board, I'm talking about Metro Council.
Okay.
Do they go to Metro Council to get the authority to go forward, or they have the independent ability to do it?
The Government Accountability and Oversight Committee has the independence to do it on their own without being ratified by the whole.
And the statute mandates that.
Right, in 2017. It actually, like a lot of big things we do in Frankfurt, I introduced it in 2016, got a committee hearing on it, but it didn't pass. So I came back in 2017, learned my lessons and modified it a little bit. And then so we passed it in the House, and then it got modified a little bit in the Senate.
Okay, I'm gonna lay back, Paul, to jump on.
Okay, so let me just clear one thing up. I think that Jerry said, and it was kind of half right. And so,
That's okay.
We got to be clear here that the current legislation in Louisville states that the inspector general would do his investigation, an initial investigation. Then he must, or she must, go to the CRAB and present the case. And they would then vote on whether or not they wanted that person to proceed with the investigation. It is not in there right now about subpoena power going to where the—
Okay, all right, I misspoke then. I thought it was, but I knew there was a vote on something at the CRAB level.
Yeah,
thanks for clearing that up, Paula.
Yeah, they vote on whether or not they want the IG to proceed with the investigation, because we were really wanting subpoena power granted directly to the IG. So it's not written in there that he would have to go to the board in order to get a vote on whether or not to go to Metro Council.
So this is a key thing, because Jerry raised the question of, what can you get past? And it is very real on our level. So the legislation, I think it's Senate Bill 309, I believe.
House bill.
I'm sorry, House. See, been in the Senate so long, it's automatic. It's automatic. House Bill 309, which is your bill, Jerry. So that bill, what does that do? I'd like to see an exchange between you two to see exactly what that does and how that rolls out, Paula, in terms of what you think is functional or not.
Well, and again, as we talked, it doesn't give the subpoena power directly to the CRAB, but it allows them to ask the GAO. It requires the Government Accountability and Oversight Committee to vote to go into closed session, and then the Inspector General would present their case, and it would give the GAO, strengthen the GAO's ability to go into closed session, be protected from the open records requests. And so again, so that police officer who wants to make essentially complaint about another officer. So they're protected in terms of they've got the protection at the CRAB level and a similar protection at the Metro Council level, so that they work together. There's not a hole in one that someone can wiggle through.
Paula?
So, of course, we would have loved it to be perfect, but nothing is perfect in government. Nothing in politics is perfect. So the perfect piece would have been to get subpoena power granted directly to the CRAB or the Inspector General. But
Right.
we know that that is not going to be something that could be passed at the state level. So
Yeah, I tried to do something similar in 2016 and was unsuccessful.
yeah, so why do something and you know it's not going to pass? Why not work to create something that would work? And so I think what Jerry's bill does is gives an opportunity to the Inspector General to go through an entity that already has subpoena power and request the subpoena power in closed session, which would protect the person who is actually lodging the complaint.
Right.
So they present the case, and the Government Oversight and Accountability Committee of the Metro Council would then determine if they want to issue the subpoena power based on the information that the IG presents. And it's hopeful from there that they can see eye to eye with the IG and that they would work the subpoena power.
Right.
Except it sounds like if they may want to do that, but it seems to me that then it gets subjected to a broader group of people called the Metro Council, who theoretically, unless there's some other language, who theoretically could just say, no, we don't think so. We disagree with you. We're not going to do it.
Yeah, no, the law basically just gives it to the GAO. It doesn't say, now actually, I'll
That's a key point now.
It is a key point.
Yeah.
Metro Council has rules, which just like you and I, the Senate passes rules, the House passes rules, and we publish our rules. That really would come under the rules of Metro Council, but there's no role for the full council in the law.
Okay.
So, and I know Paula will talk about her concern about, she wants to make sure the Inspector General has a voice in Government Accountability and Oversight Committee. But just like we don't let Metro Council tell Frankfurt how to run its committees, I don't think we're going to tell Metro Council how to run their committees. So it's really going to be in the rulemaking process of Metro government, as I understand it.
So Paula, how does that get to this question of having the independent capacity of Civilian Review Board? How do you protect that aspect?
Well,
Can you?
Okay, well, I think it should be clear in this 309 House bill that once the IG goes to the Metro Council, they're basically asking for subpoena power to be issued, for a subpoena to be issued. And once the Government Accountability Committee of the Metro Council says, sure, we see that you need this subpoena, we do need to compel this evidence or this testimony from XYZ, then we got to make it very clear that it is not the Government Oversight Committee of Metro Council that's doing the investigating from there. They're just granting subpoena power so that the IG can do his or her job. So where in that bill does it really clarify that piece?
Well, it gives GAO the ability to compel testimony and submit work and the submission of work papers, issue the subpoena, but the actual how that committee is going to work is not really in this bill. I'm double checking to make sure that there's nothing in here that gives the full Metro Council the ability to change that. And there's nothing in this bill that would give say the full Metro Council the ability to overturn the GAO's decision.
So you're saying by it being silent on that issue, that means that the full board cannot assume jurisdiction of this particular matter that we're speaking of?
I think what he's saying is right now, I think as it stands, the Government Oversight Committee of Metro Council has the subpoena power.
Right.
Right.
They can issue a subpoena without the full Metro Council having to vote on that.
Correct. And that's the way the 2017 law works.
Right. And that's the way it is. And that's the way it should stand, because once the IG goes to the Metro Council to ask for subpoena power, it should be up to the Government Oversight Committee to say yes or no without having to go to the full body of the Metro Council.
So you both are agreeing on that point.
I think so. Yeah, I believe so. I'm going to see if there's anything I can do to strengthen that. But
well, what I need strengthened is that the Government Oversight Committee understands that they are only the granting party. They don't take what the IG has expressed as the investigation and then grant the subpoena power and then take over the investigation. That's the problem that I have that's really not clear to me. We want to make sure that if the IG has done all of this investigation, he's presenting the case to the Government Oversight Committee of Metro Council just to get subpoena power, that subpoena power is granted, and then he goes on to do his job. But Metro Council then has no involvement in the rest of the investigation. You see what I'm saying?
Well, again, that's the way it's written now. What we might do, since any Metro ordinances go through the county attorney, you might want to get an opinion of the Metro Council or the county attorney to see and double check that. Does the Metro Council have the power to take that over? I don't think they do, but I'm not an attorney like Gerald is.
Let me. Thanks a lot, Jerry. just kick the can. No, I would be comfortable. I'm just listening to both of you going back and forth and trying to process this. I'm thinking that an ideal situation there would be if they had some language in there that that the only thing that committee would be doing would be to determine whether the subpoena request is germane to the investigation that's being undertaken, something like that. Then it makes it more of and I'm just off the top of my head, what kind of language do you use that I'm thinking, how do you give more independence and credibility, particularly since that's a closed piece, which I understand and agree with, but how do you do that and give trust that something happened in there that folks outside, because trust is underneath all of this stuff,
Yeah, and it's not.
So if they make a request and you narrow their option and then they shall issue, I hear your point, Jerry, about, do you do it on the state side or does the law actually do that?
And it may be worthwhile to get an opinion from
it may be,
O'Connell.
Well, let me say this.
But we can do it on the state level, Jerry. We're the state.
We're the state.
Let me say this.
Yes,
please consider doing it on the state level. And I say that because I went back and forth with the county attorney's office on whether or not we could do what you're suggesting. So we thought
Great point there, Paula.
Okay. Because in the original trying to get subpoena power, we knew that we couldn't just have subpoena power granted without state law being changed. Right. And so the county attorney kept pushing back, saying to me, no, because I thought I had a great idea. I said, well, what about Metro Council? The Government Oversight Committee has subpoena power. Why can't we let the IG go to them and request the subpoena power? Yeah. And they absolutely said no, hands down.
Without changing state law a little bit.
So, right. State law would have to be changed.
So that's why. So the question is, do we, in the state level legislation, tell Metro Council how to run its business? So
You're not
that's
telling them how to run their business.
We
You're
do that all the time. What are you
Look,
talking
good
about?
point.
we don't want you in our business, but what we do want right here is for it to be very clear that once the subpoena power is issued, it is up to the IG to continue the investigation.
Now I got to stop y'all just for a second because I got to talk to my audience just for a second.
Sure.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are experiencing the rare opportunity. This is the way a discussion might go in someone's office somewhere that you don't really see. That's why I love these two folks for coming on, because they have confidence in what they do, and they are committed to these things, that they have no hesitancy to let you see how that works. You're actually seeing an aspect of government unfolding right here between, in this instance, between a local government, Louisville, and state government where we operate on the state level. So this is a rare and a very important opportunity. Okay, let me jump back out of there. Come on, I'm excited about this myself.
Well, and just for the viewers, the way it works in Frankfurt is a representative files a bill. We have to get it to the point where it can pass a committee. Then it has to pass the House. Then it goes over to the other chamber, and it goes through the
It's the
same
Senate,
process.
Jerry. It's called the Senate. Okay.
I have my own term for the Senate, Gerald. Just so you know, the occasional, like Senator Rocky Adams, she served in the House, so we call her housebroken. She's a housebroken senator. So.
Oh wow.
But anyway, it's
Understood.
So there'll be opportunities after I file. Well, the bill's filed, but when it comes into committee, we will do what we refer to as a committee substitute. So there will be a committee substitute. So I have an opportunity to strengthen language between now and when the committee hears it.
So are you guys talking to each other? Come on. Don't tell me I brought you together now. Come on. You guys,
we've talked twice on the phone.
Oh yeah.
You guys, seems to me, I'm just, just from a piece here. It just seems to me, I don't see a lot of stuff pulling this approach apart. I get a sense that you're pretty much on the same page.
It's how can we make it work?
Yes.
And still get it through the House and the Senate.
Exactly. And make it palatable is the way we term we use, to make it palatable to all concerned. So
right.
Your audience, Senator Neal, for your audience, let me say this, that this is real democracy in action, because I have a bill and I have a lot of meat in this game. I have a fight in this. And so I could be dogmatic about it and say, absolutely not. I don't want to hear anything other than direct subpoena power to the IG. I could be that stubborn, but that stubbornness would get me nowhere, because
exactly,
Jerry is saying that won't pass at the state level.
That's true.
And so my stubbornness could kill the bill completely and just end up having nothing for the Civilian Review Board.
Okay,
so
and
that's a compromise.
That's a good point, but you can't really. I don't even call it a compromise, Paula. I see you both after the same thing. I'm getting this sense. I think it's adjusting the language to achieve the objective. I really do, because I agree with you that the Civilian Review Board has to have some independence for obvious reasons. But underlying reason is this trust piece. The thing that's tearing the community apart and tearing people apart on these issues is, I don't trust you, you don't trust me, and here's your history, and here's what you're doing. Everybody's got a big stick, and that sort of thing. We have an opportunity here. So I'm going to raise this question. Jerry, is there a way, I know there was in the bill that I had put together that I kept back because I wanted to see what else was going to come forth, as you're aware. is there any place in this bill where this could be restricted, let's say, to a consolidated government? Would that help it?
Oh, it
No.
is because
It
it's 67C.
Okay,
And
so
KRS
if that is,
67C is only Louisville
is
Metro.
you're right. Thank you. I appreciate that. So what we're saying is this doesn't affect the rest of Kentucky. It
Right.
only affects Louisville, Kentucky, correct?
Mhm.
So in effect, what's happening here is Louisville becomes sort of like, let's see how it works out. In a sense, if it from the rest of Kentucky standpoint.
Yeah.
And then if they want something like that, they can lobby for it. But here's my point. My point is, with that being the case, why would it be so difficult to pass that bill in the legislature? How it doesn't affect them directly.
It's those
It helps
pesky
Louisville.
lobbyists.
Let's see, 64, let's see, 24. How many of the Metro Council voted for this, Paula?
It was a 25-1 vote.
25-1 vote.
Strong. Mhm.
Yet we having difficulty on the state level. Are we, we worry, and I understand exactly what Jerry's saying, because been, every bill that's controversial, quote unquote, is gonna, it's got some. Why is it controversial? I guess that's the question, Jerry, on the state level. Because it only affects Louisville.
Is on a state level, the FOP is a political force.
True.
We've got former state policemen in the House, three former state policemen in the House. I think you've got one former city policeman in the Senate. You got one former state policeman in the Senate. So the state FOP, they have some power. They have influence. I won't say power. They have influence, and from passing bills for a number of years and having some fail and some succeed, I try to, when I do legislation, I'm all the time thinking about, okay, who's against it? How am I going to get around their objection?
So let me ask you this question then. What do you think is, from what you've put on the table now, what do you think would be their main objection, if you can identify one?
Well, the main objection, again, seems to be the privacy and of course the subpoena, but the subpoena is the sub issues is privacy in a closed meeting and the open records discovery.
But those things are by law already in place. Those things by law, and no one's suggesting that it is dealt with otherwise, Paula, unless there's a provision of what you do in the Metro bill that would, is there a provision that breaks into that, or what?
No, in the Metro bill, it says it goes according to whatever is regulated at the state in 67C.
So
right, but there are lawyers that make a good living off of attacking open records laws and privacy laws. So and I think that's probably where the concern is. That,
but when I know exactly what you're saying, but that's something that's scrutinized under the oversight of a court, because they can refuse to answer the subpoena. Mm-hmm. And then the action that would have to be undertaken would be they would have to go to a circuit court,
right,
to try to get that. See that? So you got a layer of independent, neutral scrutiny there. And then you also have a situation here, I think, that there are certain things that, as we already pointed out, that you can't make public. But here's what my concern is about. I'm generalizing. When you're generalizing, you're always making something that doesn't fit it, right? Mm-hmm. What disturbs me about this piece, I understand it from a human standpoint, but from an institutional standpoint and a good government standpoint, it raises a question that if a wrongdoer at some time in a system that we already have that scrutinizes over generation after generation, after legal challenge after legal challenge, should not be handled properly like anyone else in that situation, why should that person at some point in the game be shielded? I don't understand that.
Right. No, but you're right. And that's why we're trying to get the legislation right so that they don't have that concern that they need to be shielded.
Yeah.
Because as Paula mentioned earlier, there's really a separate police disciplinary process that Police Force Merit Board, I think. Isn't that what it's called, Paula?
Well, it's the police not the investigative unit, but the standards unit investigates, police misconduct as well, or any violation of their policies.
So we got about 12 minutes left. I'm hoping that we can get something resolved here. So taking another step.
Well,
let me say
in the process, as we all have discussed, it goes to the Senate. Now, I've been working. Julie Rocky Adams is well aware of the bill. She's
good.
Had opportunities to read it. So we've been talking, and if I can't get something through in the House, you and Senator McGarvey can see if you can work with her to try to make some further language tweaks.
Yeah, we work with her well.
Well,
incidentally, I've got
there's two versions in the Senate now. The Senate
I saw that they were just filed maybe Wednesday.
Yes. Okay. So now here's what I need to know from you, Jerry, is that these two versions, I don't even understand how you all operate as far as two versions out there, but there are two versions. One version of the Senate bill could mirror exactly what you're doing, because it states that the IG would have to go through some existing entity that has subpoena power. Okay. The other version of the Senate bill says that the IG could go directly to circuit court and not go through the Metro Council.
Right.
So how does that work if your bill passes, then the Senate bill, how would we make certain that these two mirror?
Well, that would have to get worked out. We got a process by which, see, the same thing has to go through the House and the Senate. It has to be to the penny, to the period. But if they don't agree, then we have a process where we ask the other body to recede. And if they do, then we'll take the version we have. Or they may refuse to do that, and it may end up ultimately in maybe a conference committee. And then where they could amend it in both houses. And if that doesn't work, they could go, if it didn't work out there, then they could go to what we call a free conference committee, where they can actually rewrite the bill. So there's a process for that.
Yeah. And actually, as I think I made a point, I can't recall if it was to Paula before, is this bill could go through the House, it could go through the Senate, be passed in the Senate. But if there was one thing in Morgan's bills that differed, and Morgan's bill was passed last, it's because it was passed last, it supersedes what was passed before. And so that's really the ultimate.
If it's passed in both houses.
Exactly, if it's passed.
Right.
It
But
wouldn't have to go back.
And so I think
that only happens when you agree.
What he's filed.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Morgan's filed what he's filed because he's not 100% certain I can get my bill through the House. I'm sure, because I've got other things. I've got 11 or 12 sections in my bill, and this is one. Really, it affects us part of a second section, but there's like 9 other provisions. And if the bill dies because of one of those other 9 sections, then Morgan's got his bill he could work through the Senate side.
Can I get you today to agree to separate the Civilian Review Board out of your piece? Make it a separate standalone?
Well, then we would just say, let Morgan's bill, I'll let Senator Neal give an opinion on whether he thinks Morgan bill could pass on its own in the Senate. And so frankly, I've combined it because there's a lot of things that I just need to get people maybe not happy with everything, but satisfied enough that I can get to 51 votes.
So you're suggesting that putting the Civilian Review Board with the rest of all of your changes is going to help pass your bill?
It could. But as I've told others, is if I thought that was going to kill my bill, I wouldn't put it in there. So, but I'm not at all confident
Well, let me say
in the
this.
Senate's ability to pass, or the willingness to pass Morgan's bill.
Let me
as a
say this.
standalone.
We're talking about process and procedure here. We're gonna lose
Yeah.
everybody doing that.
We'll get everybody bored.
What I'm trying to find out is there some common ground? Whether there's some things, Paula, that you would recommend, that you would ask Jerry to consider, and discuss those sorts of things. Because I'm you know, what's the weak spot from what you're talking about that you want Jerry to consider that he may have not looked at from a particular standpoint, for instance? What would that be with the existing legislation?
Well, the good news is if we can't get subpoena power granted directly to the Civilian Review Board, which we can't, or granted directly to the IG, which we can't, then I am totally in support of Jerry's bill. What I would like, and by the way,
how can you be totally in support of Jerry's bill? If you're totally in support of Jerry's bill,
well, that portion of Jerry's bill.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Let's not wait another hour.
I want to find out. Clear. I want to find out what you would add to it that make it what we always say, a better bill.
Well, you do want a bet. She's already, I think, made clear she doesn't want. She wants GAO to issue that subpoena without interference from the full council, and I may be able to do that. I'll need to talk to my bill draft.
So what else? And that's what I'm trying to do, is separate them out.
That's one, and I also want it very clear that the IG is presenting the case so that they can get subpoena power. And once that subpoena power is granted, the IG continues the investigation, that the Metro Council Government Oversight Committee does not get involved in the investigation.
Well, you got two issues there.
Mm-hmm.
One is, and that gets back to some suggestion I made, which may or may not be doable. I think it is to narrow the options in this particular case of what the Government Accountability Board can do or not do in terms of refusing that subpoena. In other words, if you narrow it to there to ascertain whether the request is germane to the investigation or something like that, I don't know what the criterion would be, but that's one way of doing it. That's one issue. Then the other issue is that you're talking about when you say the IG, which is the person working for the board, for the Civilian Review Board, then that person would have subpoena power. Did I hear that?
Then the state level is not going to grant subpoena power to the Inspector General or the board.
I understand that. Well, so what are you saying?
What I think Jerry is suggesting, and I agree with this
portion. I want what you're suggesting. Well,
I would suggest full power.
No.
But
we're almost there. We're almost there. Come on now.
So here's what I'm suggesting.
All right.
With what is on the table right now, make sure that the IG in closed session can present the case to the Metro Council, ask for the subpoena power. Metro Council grants the subpoena power, and then sends the IG on his or her way to finish the investigation, compel the witnesses, and do what they have to do in order to close the case.
You know the only problem with that? If you say if you have the Metro Council make the case to Metro Council, that's the problem. Because the Metro Council, as I understand it, the Government Accountability Board makes that determination and Metro Council issues it. That's the way I'm hearing this, the way the law works. Is that correct?
Right, issues the subpoena power?
No, what I'm saying is they don't have to plead to the Metro Council to issue it.
No.
In fact, I thought I heard Jerry, I think he thinks that they can issue it themselves. Is that correct?
It's within
Sure,
that
absolutely
committee.
they
They
can.
can,
So
absolutely.
it's not making the
And I
case for
really-
Metro Council is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
No, it's
Okay,
just
all
that government oversight committee. They have full subpoena power
Okay,
in that committee.
Okay.
all right. I'm
And,
clear
and
now.
what I'm saying is, I think I can make it very clear that this power is only exercised by the Government Accountability and Oversight Committee.
Yeah.
Mhm.
The rest of this, we may have to go to Julie Rocky Adams to see if we can get it in the Senate, because I don't think I can.
Okay.
But here's
Let's
one
talk,
other
let's
thing.
talk about that, Jerry. We'll talk about that.
But there's
Yeah.
one other piece. There's one very important piece to this puzzle that I don't think is in your bill, Jerry. And if this is what I'd like to see, if the subpoena power is not granted at the Metro Council level, then the IG can go directly to the circuit court to ask for subpoena power.
Well, I guess that's kind of in Morgan's bill. So I think that would be up to Morgan if he can.
Can
and the
that not be
senator.
put in your bill? Why couldn't that be in your bill?
Well, there's a lot could be in my bill, but I think
Well,
I'm going to try to
realistically,
get this through the House as quickly as
realistically-
possible. We're in a short session, so I can't
right.
continue to make changes. I've got to get it out of the House
Well, let me
as
help. Let
soon
me
as I
help you.
can, if it's in order for it to get past this session. I mean, we're already over halfway, and
That's something Julie might consider, and it can come
right,
back.
right. Is
And
I
if you
would
see an
say
oppor- if you
that
see an opportunity in
and-
committee,
and
that's an
Morgan-
opportunity. That's an opportunity, but you gotta make a judgment on that. I understand and
Yeah.
respect that.
Yeah.
So you
okay.
getting that? Okay. So look,
That would work.
let me just say this. Have we left anything on the table? Plenty. so the question is, but I have a better understanding. I hope we didn't confuse the listeners, but I thought it was a good exercise for them to understand that it's difficult doing legislation, and it's more difficult taking a good idea and running it through 100 people on the House side and 38 people on the Senate side, and quite frankly, very few pieces of legislation get through in any legislative session, and the controversial ones are even, whatever that term means, it's even less. So
Mhm.
in proportion. So you're getting sort of a sense of where we are. This is a very key question, folks. Louisville, what we have is a question of trust, a lack of trust. And are we going to get things right in Louisville, Kentucky, in this instance? And the fact of the matter is that this is not an anti-police bill. It's a pro-community bill. And I say this sometimes because it concerns me, because I see some folks, take strong positions, anti-police. You being anti-police, but the fact of the matter is the police works for its employer, and its employer is city government, and it's in reflection of what? The community. So they work for the community, and it seems a little bit out of kilter. But on the human side, I understand the concern. You work and you feel somebody's got a telescope looking at you. It makes you a little nervous, and it's always a moving thing. So we got to resolve this. That's why trust is so important here. But if we do nothing, then that's going to show a lack of trust. If we do it, we don't go far enough, that's going to show a lack of trust. And if we can't come together, we are demonstrating a lack of trust.
Mhm.
So I just think it's important, and that's why I asked you two people to come here today. You occupy very serious roles, and we're going to see what the outcome is going to be, because I think it's going to be something that the community hopefully is going to be able to say, hey, here's where state and local government work together on a very controversial issue, but came together on something that works, that engenders trust. If we can get there, it's a home run. And I think we have the opportunity to do
absolutely. It may not be exactly what we asked for, but we get the community moving forward. It's what we need.
Last word, Paula.
I would like to thank Representative Miller because he is taking this on, and without his willingness, then we may end up with nothing. And you're absolutely correct. The community is hurting. We need healing, and we need the community to start trusting in our police department again. And what his bill would do is add another layer so that here's accountability again. Nobody would say the IG is running ramshot and he's wanting to just investigate and do something without some type of accountability. So for him to have to go through the Metro Council or the Circuit Court to get subpoena power adds that layer of accountability. And so I am trusting that this is solid enough to pass in the House, and that the Senate would support some semblance of the bill so that we can go ahead and do the work that is before us, so that the police department can start getting the respect that they deserve, and the community can get some semblance of assurance that the police are not just policing themselves, but there's another set of eyes that are being fair and just to the police and for the public.
Jerry, would you like the last word, or are you good?
I'm just saying thanks to Paula for getting this discussion moving with that ordinance.
Well, I think so. And I want to thank both of you all for taking the time to present today and have this discussion. It's a very important discussion. And I look forward to seeing you both back on Straight Talk to deal with something else that's important to our community and important to you as well. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to Straight Talk. And as I always say, do the right thing.